about the collecting of phone records from Verizon customers?
Well, it's like Kirby said a couple of weeks ago. I mean, we've all been really concerned about the IRS investigations and then getting these emails from the tracking the phone calls of these AP reporters and James Rosen, the Fox News reporter. But this is much bigger. This is a huge concern to understand what it really means, this loss of privacy in American society. It's one of those issues we don't think about much, Tim and Kirby, but if we don't think about it now, we'll wish we had later.
Let me just quote from the New York Times this morning, June 5th, Dateline, Washington, D.C. And before I say that, folks, this is not meant to be, we're, talking bad about Verizon or good about another company or anything like that. We're just reporting the news as it has been, as it has happened. Okay. So, don't think that, well, Tim, you're trying to put down Verizon. No, I'm not. I'm just telling you what the federal government's doing. That's all I'm telling you, and who they're doing it to. This is the New York Times. Okay. Dateline, Washington today. I'm reading it from their online version. The Obama administration is secretly carrying out a domestic surveillance program under which it is collecting business communications records involving Americans under a hotly debated section of the Patriot Act, according to a highly classified court order disclosed on Wednesday night. Now, Kirby, this is the New York Times, but they would obviously be sympathetic to the liberal agenda of the Obama administration, so it pains them to criticize.
Right. But you couldn't have written it any better if this was One News Now.
No, but let me ask you this. The Patriot Act, I remember when it was being discussed, and President Bush was criticized by the liberal media for using the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act, I guess what I'm asking, do you know if this is something any different than President Bush did?
President Bush did not do this as far as we can determine, but it just shows you that oftentimes what takes place is a situation in which oftentimes when you are talking about one of these issues, what one particular administration opens, the next administration pushes forward. You know, Tim, sometimes if you're trying to open a jar and your wife says, can you open this? And you kind of push on it, and then finally she opens it, you say, well, I kind of jarred it, I moved it a little bit, I slipped it. Well, in some respects, the Bush administration kind of moved the jar a little bit, moved the little opening, and so as a result, the next administration just jumped into this. And so that has been always the concern that people have had with things like the Patriot Act, because indeed you opened up the possibility that other attorney generals, other national security agencies would do things that the previous one did not. And I remember back in the early part of the 21st century, I said, you may not always have an Attorney General Ashcroft in power. Now you have an Attorney General Eric Holder in power.
Kirby, the question I wanted to ask you is how significant is the bigger question of, I know there was this article a couple of months ago, One Nation Under Surveillance, and it's very concerning to me personally. I guess what bothers me, Kirby, as much as anything, is not just what the government is doing. It's that most people, they hear about this, they roll their eyes, they don't seem to care. It's almost as if Americans have gotten used to the idea, well, the government is going to be able to snoop around in everything. Have we gone so far that Americans just don't care about this anymore?
That is my fear, and that's one of the reasons why I was glad that Tim and I kind of talked about doing this program, because think about how many people will actually be photographed today. When you go out of your home, there are all sorts of cameras out there watching you right now, and one of the individuals that does the CBS series Person of Interest, Jonathan, actually Nolan, spends a fair amount of time talking about how when he grew up in London, there were very few cameras. By the time he left, there were a lot of cameras, but now there are cameras here as well. well. And so the Person of Interest program is based upon the idea that we use all these cameras to maybe catch terrorists and catch bad guys. But he also, when he wrote the script for the movie The Dark Knight, pointed out that that's a place where the Batman actually was able to turn everybody's cell phone into a tracking device. Well, all of those things that we're talking about in these television programs and these movies are taking place. And I fear what is really happening right now, Ray, is a willingness on the part of the American people to go along. In the 1990s, when we used to do programs on privacy and surveillance on point of view, all sorts of phone calls. Now we do them, not many phone calls. And I think part of it has to do with the fact that we've become used to it. And frankly, the younger generation, they're putting up lots of private information that they shouldn't be putting on their Facebook pages. They're taking videos of themselves, sometimes embarrassing videos, and putting them on YouTube. And so today, privacy isn't an issue like it used to be. And I think this might be finally enough is enough, where a number of Americans are going to say, wait a minute, I wasn't thrilled that AP reporters' phone records were being subpoenaed. I probably wasn't thrilled that in James Rosen phone records were subpoenaed. But now we're in a situation where you're looking at and having access to who I call, how many times I call them, and when I call them, and how long the conversation was taking place. I'm hoping that this becomes one of those issues that changes our mindset about surveillance, in which we finally say to the federal government, enough is enough.
But I want to be protected from terrorism, Kerby.
Sure.
So I'm torn here.
I think we all are.
I don't want to. First place, if they're going to listen to my phone calls, they're going to be very bored. but hey, if they want to listen in, I guess they can see what I'm going to pick up at Walmart on the way home. But anyway, that's I'm joking about something that's serious, because we are talking about the federal government, Big Brother, watching you. That's what we're talking about. In
ways that are unprecedented.
Yes. And the one of the great ironies of this situation, and I quoted from the New York Times earlier, and folks, we're talking about what the story that's breaking today. We're talking about surveillance in general, and we're going to get to more of that in just a moment. And by the way, we will take your calls for Kerby after the bottom of the hour. Okay, but Ray and I got a lot of questions between now and then. Okay, so hold on your questions, but between the bottom of the hour and the top of the hour, we'll take your questions for Kerby. Again, the New York Times says today the Obama administration is secretly carrying out a domestic surveillance program under which it is collecting business communications records involving Americans under a hotly debated section of the Patriot Act. The irony here is, as I say, one of the ironies here is President Obama is aligned ideologically, philosophically, legally, in his thought processes in his administration with the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. They they go to Christmas parties together, okay? They go to summer camp together. These are kindred spirits. I'm talking about ACLU, the Obama administration. And now, but what is happening under the Obama administration with these kinds of surveillance and these kinds of secret tapings of phone calls with the Associated Press, the writers, the Fox News, they're trying to call him a criminal, a co-conspirator to criminal acts, listening right. to his parents' phone lines, Eric Holder and that group. And so what is going on here? This is the political left using what some would call J. Edgar Hoover tactics to what's going on here, Kerby?
Well, I think there's a good example of where sometimes a person's ideology clouds the situation.
Did I impugn J. Edgar Hoover here?
Yeah, I don't know. But, the ACLU should be at the top of the list. By the way, I think they are. I think they're very upset about some of this right now.
The ACLU groups?
Yeah, the ACLU groups. Some of them were very upset this week of when the Supreme Court ruled that you could take your DNA.
I just want them to be consistent here. So if they are, good for them. I'm glad they're saying
And, of course,
something.
There's another one that Michelle Malkin's been following where they had all these children where they did IRS scans so they were able to scan these children. We have more intrusion into our privacy in the last couple of weeks than we've had in years. So I think we're going to have to watch and see if these civil libertarian groups are going to step forward, because, we know from foreign policy issues that there was such a hue and cry about Guantanamo, about rendition, about drone strikes and everything under Bush. And a lot of that has been muted under Obama, because a lot of the liberals say, well, now we got a
I know,
liberal
where's
guy.
Cindy Sheehan?
Yeah, where are they all?
We're the drone protesters.
So a few of them have been consistent, but it will be interesting.
A few of them have, you're right.
But the bottom line is that I think what oftentimes happens is that if you like who's into the administration, you allow for an expansion of various governmental programs. And again, I come back to the fact that everybody kind of liked John Ashcroft as the Attorney General. A lot of conservatives liked George W. Bush. So when we passed the Patriot Act, nobody had any real concerns. And I kept saying, yeah, but you won't always have a John Ashcroft as your Attorney General.
You were warning about this situation?
Yeah, you're going to have. And, of course, look what we have now with Eric Holder, who seems to only now be realizing maybe it wasn't such a good idea to get all the phone records of the Associated Press.
I tell you what, Ray, to your point or to your question about does anybody care, I do think we live in America now that's so preoccupied with so much stuff there, it's hard to get their attention. I'm talking about the general public on anything. But I will say this: you start talking to, your Joe Sixpack out here, or your American Idol watcher,
right.
And whatever about American Idol, I'm not putting it down or lifting it up. I'm just saying, the guy who they don't know who the vice president is, but they know who won American Idol. That's the American I'm talking about here. You start telling them that the government's spying on them, that will freak them out, okay? Yes. And you're going to get their attention. They may not know what the whole story is about, but this is not good publicity for the Obama administration when the New York Times is using terms like secretly carrying out a domestic surveillance program in the first paragraph of their story. That's gonna make waves across the country.
Well, and it should, because, again, we're talking about taking your DNA, tracking your children. What's the next step? We'll put chips in everybody so we know what, and again, that's going to be something that maybe comes on Obamacare. They'll be saying, well, what happens if somebody comes in and they're comatose and you don't have a next of kin? Well, as long as they have a chip, and we'll put it in their right hand.
Why are they doing this, Kirby? What in the world?
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, you knew where we're going with this. I mean, obviously, you can see how everything could be justified. And the argument is, well, we got to catch the bad guys. We got to catch the terrorists. Yes, but at what point do I lose all of my privacy? I lose all of my civil liberties. Everybody can know everything about me. And I'm not talking about secrecy. We're talking about privacy. You shouldn't keep secrets, and certainly the scriptures say that we should be above reproach, right, Ray? I mean, the scriptures talk a lot about the fact that we should have a godly lifestyle before others. So Christians shouldn't be afraid of this in that sense. But their privacy, do I want everybody to know all of my medical records? I'm not being secret here. I'm just wanting to have a little level of privacy, and that's beginning to evaporate. And wait till the IRS, your friends at the IRS, have access to the implementation of Obamacare next year. You're going to really I think you should be really concerned about the level of privacy if they have access to your medical records, and they can leak those out just as they were leaking out information from the National Organization of Marriage from the IRS. I think we've got some real issues here, and before it's all through, I suspect a few people are going to go to jail.
Talking to Kerby Anderson about the topic today on this Fire Away Thursday. We used to have Fire Away Friday, and that means you fire away with your questions for Kerby on whatever the topic is. The topic is surveillance in America, and we're going to open up the phone lines now. And when we get back from the break, we'll take your phone calls for the next 30 minutes. So here is your number to reach us, 1-888-589-8840. Toll free, 888-589-8840. Please keep your questions to the topic at hand, and try not to ramble too much when you call in. I know this is a very passionate issue for a lot of people, and it is with me, and that's fine, but let's have your questions be concise and to the point for Kerby so that we can get to as many questions as possible in the next 30 minutes on this topic. Ray Pritchard with me, Tim Wildman, Kerby Anderson in studio with us. We'll be back momentarily with more of today's issues on American Family Radio.
Here's what's coming on the next Today's Issues.
I know this.